according to Charlie, we don't have anybody on, is that right?
Correct.
Not even Brad?
No.
Okay.
Good, make sure to.
Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you very much. Our first item here is the approval of the agenda. And if it's okay with everybody, I would like to switch item 6 and 7. So we'll take care of the two grant items first and get those out of the way. And then we'll just turn to the general fund budget and spend, the rest of our evening going over that. And when we do the general fund budget, I think Brian and Julie are going to go through this, item by item, like general fund, general government, finance and administration, and so on, page by page, if you will, making a presentation. And then before we go on to the next item, what I will do is go around the room and ask every commissioner, to ask whatever questions they want. And once everybody has all their questions out on the table, then we'll go on to the next item. And after we go through that the first time around, I think we all know at this point that our proposed expenditures are exceeding our proposed revenues. So we will then, at that point, go back through and start looking at possibilities of where we can cut. And I think Brian and Julie have some ideas to start off with, but we'll go back through the second time. And that would be the way I propose that. So I propose to do that. But does anybody else have any comments or additions or deletions to the agenda at this point? Okay, I'd like to entertain a
Motion to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous, thank you. Based on that agenda, are there any disclosures or conflicts of interest anybody would like to make? No. Okay, thank you. Announcements, I'd just like to say for the record that the Carteret County News Times has struck again. And they have an article in there, I think, that was written right out of our agenda packet last time. It was basically Brian's memo on the proposal to apply for a grant to build a Southside kayak launch down here behind Town Hall. And the Carteret County News Times is saying that we approved that when in fact, we didn't. The only other announcement I have is that our next Board of Commissioners, regular Board of Commissioners meeting, I think we'll probably still talk about some budget issues there as well, will be on April 6th. Does anybody have any announcements or anything they'd like to bring up?
6? It can't be April 6th.
Can be.
13th.
Can't be April 6th, you're right.
And
I was looking 2 weeks after today. It's got to
and that's
All right.
we need
Change that.
the 5:30. We'll
April
start at 5:30, right?
13th, 5:30, yes. We were here at 5:30 today, but nobody came. Okay, next item is public comment. Charlie, do we have any public comments?
I have one letter to read.
Okay.
This is from Joseph and Donna Hightower at 145 Beechwood Drive. Dear board members, we live on Beechwood Drive and appreciate the opportunity to comment on the proposal to construct a sidewalk adjacent to Salter Path Road. A sidewalk is a valuable amenity to a town. We regularly see folks walking and running on the sidewalks/greenways in Atlantic Beach and Emerald Isle, and would expect a similar pattern of use in peak days. We have also walked and jogged along Salter Path east of Mimosa and know from experience that the existing right-of-way is a poor substitute for a sidewalk. Our only concern is whether there will be enough use to justify the cost and disruption. We assume that much of the potential use, other than exercise, would be to reach beach access points. Since the sidewalk will not benefit golf carts or homes that can use side streets to access existing crosswalks, example, streets feeding into Mimosa, the level of use to expect is unclear. If expected use is sufficient, we are more than willing to pay our share. Joseph and Donna Hightower, 145 Beechwood Drive.
Okay, thank you. Anybody like to respond to the Hightowers?
Just for the board, for everyone, you remember from the sidewalk meeting, the fellow sitting over here from the Emerald Isle Club, he invited, Clark, you want to hear this, he invited John and I to a conference call or to meet with him concerning funding options from Greenway, the East Coast Greenway. So I'll do that just out of general interest, so.
All right. Okay. New business. The grant from NCEM for transportation infrastructure. Brian, do you want to introduce that?
Yes, so this was the grant that came out in late February with a 31 March deadline, which is kind of very unprecedented. And it's also unprecedented because it's 100% funded. And one of the managers of this is Jeff Welker. If you remember that name, we've been working with him on FEMA issues for 3 or 4 years. Not that that'll benefit us, but I've spoke to him already. But what I propose is we apply for a grant to the funding issues that we face on Cedar Road and Arborvitae Court. Do that with a rather simple design of a drop inlet in the town right of way and a subsurface drainage line to the canal. That's essentially what the project would look like, those 2 different lines. Before I talk about those, just a couple of things. Why we think we're eligible, it's resiliency related, and it specifically mentioned resilience against natural disasters. So back to the lines themselves, and this was a key for the Arborvitae Court one, which the board may recall. After Florence, Arborvitae Court came to us and said, you know, we'd like to have this line installed, and it is traditionally one of our worst flooded areas, to the point that we legitimately would have trouble getting emergency vehicles down there. Arborvitae Court came to us in the arrangement, Larry will remember this, is the town would fund the design and the neighborhood would fund construction. Unfortunately, 2 things kind of hit, COVID, and then the neighborhood organizer passed away. It was Paul Ferrone, we all know Paul, and it kind of fizzled out. I was just recently approached by Miss Maria DeCandia about the status of that. And, you know, I kind of told her, well, back to the neighborhood to come up with the funds, and then 2 weeks later, this grant was announced. But anyway, applications are due on 31 March. Again, we've been pumping into the canal at both of these locations routinely, more routinely at Arborvitae every heavy rain event, maybe even tomorrow morning, depending on how deep the water is. Cedar Road only during the worst of events. But there is home damage involved in Arborvitae Court. One home specifically bad, but the main issue in Arborvitae Court is passage of emergency vehicles. Over on Cedar Road, multiple homes where garages are flooded and septic fields are compromised as well. So they're going to award this grant, and this is also a quick turnaround. This is probably a simple one. They're going to announce awards in July. And if we were to get this 100% grant, we'll ask for 100%. I envision doing the work this winter. The one on Arborvitae Court, and I think I had this in the agenda packet, is designed already. So we'd only be paying for design on one, then construction on.
Can we make the deadline all right?
Yes, I have the grant 90% complete. I'm waiting on Ron Cullifer, who did the design on that, to give me construction cost estimates. Which I want to put in there as well.
This has nothing to do with the DOT drain line on Cedar.
It's not.
Nothing.
And the DOT drain line on Cedar doesn't drain from the road, that drains from the highway.
Yeah.
And this is further north.
Right.
And
Right.
lower in the bowl. So this is a project I think we could manage in-house. It's really simple. Imagine on arborvitae, 100 feet of what we did on phase 2. So, we would not, as I'm going to mention general contractors later tonight, this is not one of those projects. So anyway, request the green light to send that grant in by the 31st.
I just have two questions. Do you have the, as part of the design of one arborvitae, do you have the rights of way already? Easements?
No. I mean, I don't need the easements by the grant application.
No, but I mean, those aren't in order anyway there, right?
On arborvitae, it's not 100%.
I know people were so eager to do it that give you the right leg, but as far as
Their first floor.
The right away.
So I'm 100% with 2 people on Cedar. I'm probably 75% on arborvitae.
now, if it makes,
Their concern, by the way, isn't the line. Their concern is what will this do to my seawall? Because the line is
Right.
going to come underground, go through the seawall.
Right.
Cullifer's convinced he can do it.
We had that problem on Acorn Court too, didn't we? I mean, that same concern came up.
Anytime we mention moving through seawalls, that comes up.
well, the reason I mentioned that is Mrs. Everhart, who's right along where it's going to go on Cedar, pulled me over a year ago, whenever she bought the house. She said, just for someone to check out, that the right of way was never given back.
Oh, you're talking the ancient easement.
Why?
Right. You mentioned that
Not
to me.
given back, it's still there. It's not ancient or new. If it's not ever given back, then it's still good. That's all. I don't know if it's true or not. Someone's
No,
got to check the
I
registry.
need to
That's all.
check into that. I mean,
I was just trying to
you
give you that.
and I remember that Mayor Kenya returned all those easements.
Well, allegedly,
I don't,
I'm just giving you information what she told me. I don't know.
I'll check on that.
I didn't check the registry, but just so you have, she said that between her house, the right-hand side of where her house is, the drive-in garage, on the right-hand side, the gray house, in your picture, it shows it flooded. That doesn't.
Well, I mean, quite frankly, she just bought the place, so she's probably read it. So she might,
trying to give
she
you,
may be
make
right.
it easy, that's all.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, if we can get funds 100%, yeah, indirectly, we're all paying taxes, federal government, the state. But if it's not money directly out of our pocket here, I'll make a motion to
I'll second the
authorize
motion,
going
because we
forward.
know that arborvitae court especially is
That's a
just.
state motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Excuse me.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, moving right along, let's talk about the next grant. Apply for grant NCDEQ for the water system.
Okay, this is the big grant, so to speak, dollar-wise. So the state announced that they're using state ARP funds for water and wastewater improvements, total of 1.6 billion. However, 54 million of this falls into a category that we're eligible for. The majority of money is going to distressed systems. The DEQ is going to run it complete with the full package of federal funding compliance. What's our uniform guidance compliance? It'll be a little more complex that way. Of note, all funds must be expended for this grant by December 30th, 2026. So if we were to get it, what I'm about to talk about, what we're going to do, we're going to have a lot of time to do it, and we're probably going to need a lot of time to do it. We're eligible, local governments are eligible. Applications for this are due by May 2nd. Regarding what we want to do, and this is pretty extensive, and Julie and Sunny get the bright shiny star for putting this list together. What we did was we looked at the asset management study that we did a couple years ago. And recall that Sunny did a good inventory and assessment of our entire system. So everything on here is Sunny certified, so to speak. Stuff we made up. It's in our asset management study. And we went through this, identified what we thought was achievable in this project. Of note, it includes replacing the Roosevelt Boulevard water tank. Okay, that's $1.5 million itself. So it's really broken into 2 grant applications: replacements, replacing water main, a water main size for same size, or expansion. Taking what was a 6-inch pipe and replacing it with a 8-inch pipe.
Adequate.
So Clark, to answer a question that you had earlier this week, we do have lengths of all these.
Okay.
Sunny was out there. I didn't put that on.
That's okay.
Yeah, we have lengths of all of these. The timing of the projects, if we were to get this grant, I see this as probably being 3 years of work. This wouldn't be a single season project, and we would phase this out probably in 3 different phases. Now, as far as the grant preparation, I called, initially recall we were talking to the local woman who does the CAMA grants, the one we were initially talking to about the kayak launch. She saw the complexity of this, and while I was in Florida, quite frankly, called Julie and said, I'm not going to do this. You need to find somebody that works with DEQ and things as complex. I also talked, and bring this up during our succession planning, I had a discussion with Michelle Powers about expertise in grant writing. And this is a grant I think we need some outside help putting together. So I called the Eastern Carolina Council, whose job is to provide member units, and we're one with grant help. They don't have that in-house right now because they're going through some heavy seas personnel-wise there. They referenced me to Colliers Engineering. They're based out of New Jersey, but they have 3 offices here in North Carolina with plenty of work to include grant preparation. I'd like to hire Colliers to put in these 2 applications because if we were to get this grant, this is going, you remember last year when we were talking about the Water Enterprise Fund budget, I was telling you that, hey, starting in really this coming fiscal year, we start getting hot and heavy with our capital expenditures. We could address most of our Water Enterprise Fund capital expenditures if we were to get this grant. Not all, but most. So anyway, I want to go with Colliers. The application includes a PE stamp project cost estimate, a pretty complex priority rating system, and a project map of the work area that I think is going to be GIS based. We're not quite there yet as far as the ability to use that. So the cost to go with Colliers is $13,640. So if we were to go with this, I'd fund this from our water system unrestricted net assets, which will be at $532,000 on 30 June. Remember, we had a big expenditure this year for the project we're working on right now on Sulphur Path Road. We haven't budgeted anyway. It's not all expended. So I'm requesting authority to apply for the grant and authority to go with Colliers.
And the amount of money that we stand to get.
I won't know that until, I won't know that, John, to the number. I can speak authoritatively based on the PE cost estimates, which is part of the grant application. But conceivably as much as $2 million.
What's the total amount you're asking for now?
Again, I won't know until the PE.
No, but for how?
For this, 13,640. That's what's in the proposal.
I just have one quick question. Is there a method to your madness of why you broke it up, the two applications, in case we
Yes,
not together?
you want to explain that?
Yeah, so on the priority rating system of the projects, you, in the first group of where you're selecting your project, it has to be either expansion, replacement, or there's two other very high point ones that do not apply to us. So you can't combine it. That's what we thought we could do is have one application with, some that's expansion, some that's replacement. You cannot do that. It has to be, one application has to be replacement, the other one has to be expansion. So we have to have two.
So two, I was thinking even, I know it's more work, but the less the amount, the more likely you'd get, or do they score differently? Did you break it into
Well,
smaller chunks or?
I don't have I think the scoring priority for expansion and replacement is pretty similar, and you get a couple extra points because it's over the age of 40, everything we're doing.
Good, Julie.
But I don't know if further on in these multiple pages of priority rating things, if there's, because my vision started getting blurred. I'm not really sure if there's more to it.
Two other things, if I may. At the April meeting, we approved this tonight, ongoing, there's a required board resolution. It doesn't commit us to anything other than saying we intend to, it does commit us if we get the grant. But I'll put a board resolution in front of you, you folks. That's number one. Number two, if I can get to it, on that priority rating sheet, we have a 5-year capital plan. That's what we've been doing. We'll get points if we have a 10-year capital plan. So what I'm going to do is reference that asset management. I don't want you to think I'm just throwing things out there for 5 years. They don't have to be quite explicit from years 6 through 10 according to the state. But I'm going to reference the asset management plan and ask the board to adopt a 10-year water enterprise fund. So, and lastly, Sonny, could you explain to the board why we're replacing, the two reasons why we're replacing that water tank? I don't want the public to think it's ready to fall down.
No, the reason why we replaced it is because the other tank is $250,000 and this tank is $150,000, of course. The other tank is taller than this one, and to make it system more for Jason to put fires out, he has a pretty good load out there. When you have one tank smaller than another, the water doesn't displace like it's supposed to do with everything else. I'm making it work because I want to do that.
But the reason we want the additional capacity is we have to have capacity that's a certain percentage of our usage. And Sonny believes our usage is going up.
Yeah, it is going up. Yes, it is.
And
What do you do with old water tanks?
Well,
Sell them on
Make a
eBay?
boat out of it?
it depends. I mean, if we can sell it, that'd be great. If we take some money off of it for replacing it with another one, that's good too. We won't know till we get right to the further down.
There's some money to salvage for that.
Regardless though,
Yeah.
I mean, if we get the money, we should do it.
so you're going to have water at a higher elevation that will improve pressure for firefighting. And we're going to increase capacity. And if we increase capacity related to our usage information, that helps. The success of our water system is because of him, but what he does is he does not over pump our wells.
It would complement the 10-inch main we're putting in too. All this will work together.
And there might be some, back to what Alicia was saying, there might be some benefit once we get into it with the engineering firm. There might be some benefit to splitting that one into two separate applications because I don't want the baby thrown out with the bathwater thing. If they don't like the tank thing or don't see the need for that, but the mains are okay, there might be some benefit in, I mean, when you're doing two, why not do three?
So the
At
main
this-
thing is the authority in this amount of money in Collier Engineering, right?
Right.
Alicia.
Is this 100% or is this a matching?
No, it's matching, but the way the state presented it to me is they would offer us a grant and a proposed match, and they're doing that based off the health of your system. And we'll have to look at what we can
Decide.
afford,
And there's also the possibility of zero interest.
Yeah, and they may offer zero interest loans too, which would still be smarter than pulling out of our waterfront.
The cost of the Collier application process is, if we're talking about a potential of $2 million grant, it's like less than 1% of the, it's like 100 to 1 odds here.
Yeah.
So it's worth throwing the dice.
And even if we don't get the grant right now, this grant would be looked at again in their fall round. And they expect,
Same application.
yes, and you're allowed to shine it up a little bit in the summer. If, hey, you didn't get points for X, say we can look at it and improve it. That's what they said during the webinar. And there's a potential that when we keep talking about the 1.2 trillion in infrastructure money, there's a potential for some of that to go to the clean water state revolving fund.
Okay.
Excuse me, drinking water state revolving fund, different animal. And this would be considered with them as well.
Bill used the phrase no brainer. I think this is the same thing. It's well worth the risk involved.
We have a motion by Clark to
Second.
approve, second by Commissioner Connect.
But to have the amount of money in it for Collier Engineering and to apply for the grant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
It
no-brainer.
really is.
If we need to spend the money eventually, why not try to do grants, even if it's cost sharing? It's less than paying for it all ourselves. It's got to be done eventually.
So we could potentially get one grant and then another one later because our application is already done.
Where they might offer us zero interest loan on one or
Yeah.
both.
This is upgrading the pipe too.
So we're taking the AC pipe out of the equation. Right now, the AC pipe is working good for us. But after concrete gets 50 years old, it works against you.
We're gonna have to do all this stuff anyway at some point.
Sure. It's always a good thing for everybody.
That's absolutely on the plan now.
Okay,
Hasn't made sense.
a second. Is there any further comments or discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? It's unanimous.
I just have one more question. So when other grants come about, will this particular engineering firm be, once you get a good feel for their working relationship, could you go to them as more things?
Yeah, they're a
come?
pretty big firm.
So this
yes.
can be like a test for them.
Right?
Yeah.
It's engineering design. They're full service out and they're up and down the East Coast. Check them out on the internet. But they have a presence here. We're not dealing with people from Jersey. We're dealing with people from-
Is that like a true southern display? Southerner
I know
now.
it's an inside deal.
Okay. That brings us to the main course.
Yeah.
The general fund budget. Take it away.
Okay, so of course, this is our first workshop on the FY 22-23 budget. So Larry's heard this before, but a reminder for anyone present or listening that this is normally our first discussion where we look at different options on things before we make a decision. We have to make a decision prior to 30 June. So tonight we'll go into detail on each department budget line by line. And of course, everyone's here to answer specific questions. And I ask all the department heads, if I make a mistake, just stop me, because I probably will make so. So the bottom line up front, the draft budget has expenses at $5,140,000 with revenue at 4.3 million. So we have a delta tonight of 840,000. So I will recommend a tax increase in the coming fiscal year. So the two major reasons for this are the adopted pay adjustments as well as inflation, which I've addressed with cost of living. 722,000 of the 840 is due to those two factors. I'm also recommending one additional full-time employee at a cost of 49,000. And this is part of some discussion on succession planning that I'll address at the end of the brief. The remainder of the delta, that small amount, is a pretty significant inflation factor for fuel. And of note, just because it's in the news of recent, is a bump up in IT security that we'd like to do with ACS. So tonight, I'm going to brief off the detailed department pages, skip over the roll-up pages. You have both. If you wonder why I'm skipping a page, we're going to skip the roll-ups. So I recommend that you pull page 19, is the CIP page, the last page, pull that out and set that aside, because as I go department by department, I'll reference that. Page 1 is our overall general fund roll-up page. And again, we have the 840,000 delta. And again, I'll talk at the end about ways to address it. If you look at the expenditure details, bottom half, if you look at the expenditure details and focus on the original budget we discussed at this time last year, you can see the impact of the inflation and the wage increases. So before we dive into the department budgets, I'll ask Julie to review pages 2 and 3, which are the revenues. Our revenues are generally stable with an exception of an increase in sales and use tax. If we have any questions, John, on page 1 or points people want to bring up on page 1 before Julie jumps into revenue.
Anybody have any questions on page 1? No. Okay, Julie, page 2.
Okay, so starting at the top of page 2, you can tie these major categories back to that first roll-up page of page 1. Starting right off with property taxes. In my estimate for next year's property taxes, I did take into account some growth in our tax base based on construction. And of course, those new values have to be homes that were CO'd by December 31st of 2021 in order for them to be on our tax rolls for as of January 1, 2022. So anything that you see under construction right now won't hit us until 23. But there is still some growth in what was completed last year. So budgeting a little bit of growth in real property. And then I'm bound by state statute. I cannot budget for a higher collection rate than what we're experiencing. So I budgeted for the collection rate that we're experiencing right now, which then gives me that $2,040,000 at the current tax rate of 20.7 cents. Moving down, the motor vehicle tax, that's the taxes on your registered motor vehicles when you go to renew your registration or register a new car. Those are collected by the state for us and then issued to us on a monthly basis. And that is just an estimate based off of what I believe this year will come in. Not, that is a fluctuating, it's hard to build growth on cars.
So you have to use the same number?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're not the same collection rate. That doesn't apply to that because of course the state's collecting it for it. But for the tax rate, all the same tax rates apply to your car or boat, but those are in your normal ad valorem taxes. And then a small amount for interest on taxes because not everybody pays their taxes by January. So we do have to bill interest on taxes. So that's just a small estimate at $4,000. Then moving down to the next major category, which is where one of the larger revenue sources comes in. I mean, privilege licenses, we don't have a lot of commercial entities in town, so there's very minimal privilege license revenue. But sales and use tax distribution, my estimate, I think Brian put in the status update that the month of December brought in a record amount of sales and use tax for us. And there's a 3-month lag, of course, so I received December in March. And I'm estimating that will come in close to $1 million at the end of this fiscal year, just in the general fund. And just as a reminder, our sales and use tax distribution is split the same proportion that our tax levy between ad valorem and the beach tax is. So some goes to beach, some stays in the general fund because of that tax levy distribution. So I'm estimating now, one of the little nuances that makes estimating sales and use tax completely diabolical is that, so we're an ad valorem base, of course, in this county, and the tax rates that everyone in the county have right now, and the proportions of that are what our distribution for next year are based on. So if somebody raised taxes in the county this year that we're in right now, and we did not, of course, our little shift, our percentage is going to shift a little. So the percentage might fluctuate, but it's hard to know exactly what that's going to be without knowing everybody else's tax levy. And then the very small amount, solid waste disposal tax, that's a tax on dumping at landfills that then comes back to, on a per capita basis, comes back to municipalities. Very minimal, and we have to spend it on solid waste stuff if we have no problem spending less than $1,000 on that. And so that's it for that category. Some other, so in addition to our own property taxes, we have a number of consumption-based revenues is what I call it. So your sales and use tax is one, solid waste is another one. In this next category, alcohol and beverage tax and franchise and utility, that's a distribution of taxes on fortified wine, malt beverages, fortified wine, and unfortified wine. That's the alcohol and beverage, and that's a population-based distribution back to the municipality. And then franchise and utility taxes are your taxes on piped natural gas, telecommunications, and electricity. And all of these are, of course, the state keeps a percentage and then they send back, a percentage of the other to municipalities. So that varies. And franchise and utility tax really is not that, it's been pretty flat. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of volatility there. So it's, I don't project any real growth in that. It's pretty flat. On restricted intergovernmental category, these are grant type things or money that's being reimbursed for a specific purpose. So the first one is camera reimbursement, and that's just a reimbursement to us for camera minor permits that we administer through this office. It does not amount to a whole lot. It's a quarterly distribution you get. The amount I have programmed in here for FEMA reimbursement is reimbursement for the Widow Bryan, the administrative services for like the FEMA excess funds projects. That's just the reimbursement for that I have programmed because that is FEMA reimbursable. Under grants for police, I have programmed Triad grant that we ask for every year. We are asking for the Triad grant to cover the antenna, Law 6 antenna upgrade, and $9,000 of Jason's turnout gear. And then there's a small amount budgeted in here because the League of Municipalities reimbursed us for Kevlar vests that we purchased. Not 100%, but it's $250 a piece or something. Yeah. So that's in that $26,000 figure. And then your other one, which is a heavily restricted source of state revenue, is the Powell bill revenue. And this used to be tied to motor vehicle fuel tax proceeds, but in 2015, the General Assembly changed the law on that and made it just that it's an appropriation in the budget. And whatever they decide to appropriate, 25% is distributed based on the number of miles you have of your own town streets. And then 75% of what you get is based on population. And you have to use that money for improvements to your own streets. Moving on to the little bit of catch-all category in permits and fees. There's a number of fees that we have. The first one here is your ambulance transport fees. And of course, when Jason's crew takes you to the hospital, there's a charge for that. And so this is revenue from insurances and private payment for ambulance calls. We do not pursue Pine Knoll Shores property owners after insurance pays. Kind of a common misconception about that. But the ambulance collection company is going to bill your insurance, and Medicare laws require them to send you 3 statements before they'll stop, before our contractor can stop sending you statements. That's an identity theft protection measure. And then after that, we don't pursue time enforcement. So that again that's one that's a little hard to predict how many calls we're going to go on. But we're trending right to about 55, a little under budget maybe for this year. It depends how spring turns around. So I'm budgeting at 55. Building permits are pretty self-explanatory. If you look around town, we're trending to about 122,000 this fiscal year. And I don't foresee a whole lot of slowdown in that, but being conservative at 115 for building permits, but I don't anticipate a whole lot of slowdown there with what is projected to be happening in some subdivisions. Then cell phone tower leases, we have 4 cell phone tower companies. Well, really 3 companies. Verizon's just on 2 of our towers. And we split that currently 50-50 between the general fund and the water fund. So that's a 50% of the total revenue we receive from cell phone tower leases. And then court fees and citations, that's money we get back from the court system when our officers go to testify, et cetera, against the bad people that they pull over or arrest. Fire and police coverage reimbursement. So this has 2 parts to it. The aquarium pays us. So the state of North Carolina pays us for our fire and police coverage of the aquarium. And then the water company reimburses the general fund for police and fire coverage of the water company, the water system at whole. And that portion of it is what we do. What I do is I take the fiscal year ending assets, the value of the assets that the water company has that are being protected, plus the current fiscal year's budget, and that is assessed the tax rate. And that's what the revenue amount is for that. And that currently is around 11,000 of that 16. The next part is another function, another reimbursement function from the water company, which is hydrate testing. So this is Jason's crew going out, exercising of the mains. So it's time and supplies for Jason's crew doing the hydrate testing. Some small things, the next few ones, miscellaneous permits are mostly golf registration charges, golf cart registration, sorry. Prior year solid waste is just collection of people who have not paid their solid waste fees from a prior year. Re-entry pass reissuance fees. Of course, if you need another re-entry pass, we charge you $25. And so that's that amount. The right-of-way mowing reimbursement, that is a reimbursement from Ncdeq for our mowing and beautification of Highway 58. That is an agreement that we have with the state of North Carolina. And for years, we were only receiving $4,500 and then every year I asked for more and more, and then somebody new got into a job, remember? Very nice guy who like doubled our fee. It was like, great. So I might need to spooge him again. But, so we get almost exactly 9,133. And then video franchise tax is very similar to the other franchise taxes that I mentioned up above. It's just on your video programming services. It's a distribution from the state portion of tax on that. And then our next big one is waste disposal income, which is your solid waste fee. And in here, I did program an increase in the solid waste fee based off of what we figured when we did the RFP bidding and the award of the new contract. So that has the solid waste fee going from $220 to $236. And that is billed to roughly 2,050 units, plus our commercial establishments get billed exactly what their use is. So that estimate for next year is higher based on that increased solid waste fee to cover the contract.
Okay, are there any questions for Julie on anything on page 2? Carl?
Just one other comment that I think we would look at is the cell phone tower lease distribution. Some time ago, I feel this very strongly philosophically, that you wouldn't have that fee at all if it wasn't for those towers that are water departments. If we didn't own the water department, we wouldn't have any of those fees. And so philosophically, it seems to me that they should go to the water department. We switched it to this about 8 years ago or 10 years ago when we had pretty serious financial difficulty in order to balance things, but it seems to me philosophically, it's not correct. I know it's legal according to the state, I realize that. But philosophically, I don't think it's correct, because if you didn't own the water department, you wouldn't have any of this income. So I'll just make my pitch again.
Okay, let's go this way. We'll go Alicia, Bill, Robert.
Okay, I just have a question about the sales and use tax. Is that based on our consistent record years over the past year? Or is that a different sales and use? You know, we had record visitors this past year due to COVID. So I wondered, is that number based on that?
Well, so it's based on current experience, but the current experience is that has not dwindled. So in other words, we had in 2020, 21, we had higher sales and use tax because people came and stayed.
Yes.
And then in 21, 22, we're having higher sales and use tax because they didn't leave. And then it's continuing. So in other words, I haven't predicted a fall off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the experience of the monthly distributions we're getting is that it is so much higher than traditional. Like I said, for December to be over $100,000, that's never happened in my time here. It's just, that's an astronomical amount for the month of December. Here.
In my thought, I think it's fine to do that, but we need to be cautious to know that as gas prices go up, it may affect the tourism of the area, which is going to affect the sales and use tax. So that was all I. And for the wastewater treatment plant, we haven't increased the rates yet. It'll be done with this budget. Is that what? Or I thought it was done.
Solid waste?
Yeah, for the solid waste. I'm sorry.
Right, because it all goes on your tax bill, so it's voted as part of the budget. Yeah.
Thank you.
A couple of things. First of all, I appreciate your comment, Clark, but I actually feel contrary. I think that the user should be paying the cost of operating the water system and so forth. And I would actually suggest we take that half of that Powell money, but the cell phone money, and put it in the general fund budget and have none of it going in this, to the water fund. That's the way I feel about it. And the users then are going to pay the cost to produce and, transmit the water and so forth. That's my feeling.
They do pay now.
Pardon?
They do pay.
Yeah, but you're subsidizing the cost by 83,000.
Well, what I've done with that, but just for transparency though, what I've in the last, I'm trying to remember, 4 years, we'll say, it might be longer than that. This this cell phone tower revenue in the water fund has been my additional principal pay down of the water debt.
What is that?
So that revenue hasn't necessarily been subsidizing the base fee and usage fees covering expenses. It's been dedicated to paying down the debt.
Okay, well, I guess my position would still be the same, though.
Yeah, I just
Paying the
wanted to-
debt down there, why isn't it being applied to the general fund?
Well,
Yeah, I know.
it's a whole big long thing.
Yeah, but, okay. Second comment is, or question is, there are 4 items that there's 0 actual revenues to date. Are they paid on an annual basis or how are they paid?
Yes, so the alcohol and beverage tax, that comes in May. I believe it's an annual distribution. And then the fire coverage and hydrant that's an entry that I make usually at the end of the fiscal year. Although the state pays, I think the state makes their payment around May also. And right of way reimbursement is also a tail end of the fiscal year thing.
And the last question is, I think you stated that for the ad valorem taxes is based upon the values as of the end of 2021. Is that correct?
Right.
Does our county ever do interim assessments when a property is completed in the middle of the year and certificate of occupancy? Because I know some places that's done. You get a
So
partial
it's-
bill for the year once the certificate of
Right.
occupancy is issued.
It's not, because it's your values as of January 1 of that year. So what we do is we report to the county if certificates of
Yeah.
occupancy are given out. And that's just kind of a tickler for them to know there's a new home there. So when January 1 comes around, send an assessor out to add it to our rolls. So they don't do a mid-year.
It's different by state.
Yeah, I know, because I know back in Pennsylvania, we did interim assessments.
Well, they were in debt earlier.
You know, if you completed, midway part through the year, you got a partial tax bill for that year.
Mhm.
Just a curiosity question. Percentage of people who pay for their ambulance when they get their bills? I would guess, because we've never pushed collecting that.
I paid that.
I did too. I did too. We're not real smart, are we?
I think the collection rate is pretty good. However, it's not necessarily, so it's a billing company. So they're not necessarily a collection agency,
I
they're a
understand.
billing company.
I was just looking
And
for
so-
just a general.
Yeah.
But
Can we get half of it?
point of clarification, it's not that we don't charge residents anything. It's if we have a cost of $600 and your insurance covers $450, we don't chase you down for $150.
That's what I was saying,
And
that's what I said,
Okay.
20 to 4.
We had like the highest percentage of
Yeah.
reimbursement in the county and just socioeconomics who we serve. it most-
I was just curious.
More of our people have insurance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we get a lot, we actually get.
And you're older, so they're on Medicare, which is.
Exactly, yeah, we actually do pretty good.
But that was a policy decision
Uh,
15 years ago.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Kind of worse. Yeah.
And I return checks too. I mean, if I get a check that is sent from somebody who is a Pine Hill Shores resident, we send it back with a letter that says, if you're paying a check outside of your insurance, I'm not paying. So I've done that several times.
Could I just suggest that, I know a few people off and on have been angry because they've gotten 3 bills. So maybe if we, I don't know, turn of the year or July, have a special article in here that just deals with it. No, down, just so people feel foolish once they hear about it, but
I get that all.
and personalities, that's all.
At least twice a week, I got somebody ask me about why I get, or not that, why I get a letter, look at them or come in and say, hey, I want to pay a bill.
Yeah.
Why don't you live here and let them worry about it?
Why don't you get a tax meter and put it in the.
Yeah, so maybe
Donations.
maybe the mayor can write a nice economic explanation.
All over. Non-resident, resident.
Mhm.
How about page 6? I think we're on page 6.
Three.
It's three.
Oh, I skipped it.
You're not in a rush, are you?
So there's just a few on this page, not a whole lot.
Page, yeah. There's two numbers if you look on the pages.
Oh, that was Charlie did that.
Oh.
Charlie did that with his fancy PDF stuff.
Blame it on Charles.
Like me.
So investment on earnings, of course, we're at point nothing again as far as investment earnings go, so we don't have much projected for that. Then down in other revenues, the only thing that I have budgeted down there, so gasoline tax refund. Of course, we pay gas tax when they come fill up our tank back here, but then at the end of the fiscal year, I submit to the state to have that money refunded to us. So that's just, that's a refund that we get. Under miscellaneous of $1,000, that's really, it's a minor point in case something comes back to us or somebody needs to reimburse us for something that doesn't fit in any other category. It's inconsequential.
What were the big numbers in
The big numbers in there this year was, remember when Select Bank got sold to First Bank, they had to refund us 2 CDs. So that's why that was such a big, and the reason I had amended the budget to 300,000 because we had 3 CDs there. But the third one just matured and it was outside that window that they couldn't have public funds, so it's fine. You won't see that go up to 300. Park revenue, I've got a small amount budgeted here, tournament money, maybe some of this is selling shirts for the birthday celebration. They're gonna order shirts and sell them for the birthday celebration, things like that. Shoreline is a small amount of revenue. We get 20% of advertising sales revenue from Carteret News Times for the ads in that shoreline over there. Again, sweatshirts, I'm sorry, the sweatshirts and stuff like that for the birthday are here in the sweatshirts line. The park revenue is like tournament money or turkey truck money, that type of thing. And then tax collection services is the amount of the revenue that we receive from Indian Beach for collecting their taxes for them. And as of right now, I don't have anything programmed in here for appropriation of fund balance.
Violations are like tree permits and that kind of stuff.
Yes, violations, yeah. And I don't budget for violations because I don't know.
Okay, are there any questions on page 3 or 6, depending on which number you're looking at?
Yeah, right.
It's only 3 hours.
I know, we printed hard, we're good.
No questions.
Okay, next, let's go to page 4.
Okay, page 4 is the roll-up for general government. So I'm going to blow past that and then go into each one of those departments in this. So over to page 5. Page 5 is governing body. So we have no significant change to board, dental, and vision. We just received a slight reduction in our cost of vision insurance. We plan a retreat this February as well, so we programmed some funding if we decide to go to a location. Trinity Center charges us for that.
Like the Greenbrier, like the federal government does again.
So we go to Trinity Center and the Hampton Inn and now the Hotel Alice, we decided to do that, but we might decide to stay here again. So we'll see. We budgeted $1,000 there. No change to the board salary programmed. Under professional services, other, this is a list I give you every year, but there's one new one here. It covers our bank fees, any unplanned engineering fees over the course of the year. And we occasionally have small engineering services. The Widow Bryan expenditure that Julie mentioned earlier, the people helping us with the FEMA administration. As a example, engineering fees, the survey we did out back recently,
for the public safety storage shed, and also the sidewalk feasibility study. They're examples of things that we pull out of this line. Also covers our municipal code contract for the maintenance of our online code book. I've also budgeted in this department, actually split, and I'm going to address this later when we talk about the Delta. I budgeted $25,000 for a fellow from the North Carolina School of Government. This individual, think of him as a nine-month intern. He or she would be on board temporarily from August of 22 until June of 23. And I'd envision using this individual to help us initiate several of our planned activities from the strategic plan.
You said 35. You mean
Where is it?
23? Where is that? You said 25,000.
That's on the second, so not on here.
That's in that 70,000.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still, I'll announce when I go down the line. Yeah, that's still in professional services.
Gotcha.
So that's why you see that kind of bump up. So our professional services attorney is exactly what you think, and that's always a kind of a little bit of a guess, but I thought just to give the board the ideas and things, the heavy lifting things this year. Anytime we do amendments to cell phone leases, Melissa works that. That was an expenditure. We had a big issue this year with between the Windjammer and the place to the east with clutter, and it got kind of ugly. I needed some help from Neil with some sorting that out. That was an expenditure. He writes, or they help us with delinquent property tax owner letters. That's kind of what we do after we can't get it done inside. They helped us extensively this past year with the solid waste contract and the RFP review. They helped us with the issue with the station club, moving from the old outfit to Easter seals. Quite a bit of review of Kevin's 160D compliance when that came out. And then several ordinance enforcement issues where he helped draft either drafted or reviewed. Anytime I send out a notice of violation, if it's not routine, if I think that there's a concern, I run it by Neil. Not everyone, but some of them. There's more of these too, and we can get that to anyone who's interested. Moving down, the audit is what we pay Martin Starnes. For the shoreline, we budgeted a slight increase to address anticipated postal increases. Hopefully that won't come to.
Easter seals.
And the Easter seals, yes, thank you. Under gifts, honors, and allocations, we send 1,500 to, this isn't everything, but I'm reading the highlights. 1,500 to the library, 800 to Allied for Cherry Point. We budget 1,300 for the staff and volunteer Christmas party we do here. 600 for a staff Christmas party lunch here, and then 600 more for gifts and flowers we normally send as bereavement type things to folks. Sponsorships, we sponsor NC Byways conference, both conferences each year. All 4 beach towns sponsor a breakfast, I believe it is. That gets us an extra seat to the conference, so that's budgeted as well for $4,000. Moving down, the history committee is bumped up considerably, you see, and that is by and large the line for our 50th anniversary events. That the big ticket item is $2,400 for food. The Women's Club is going to handle the food portion of this. And then we have children's activities. Mrs. Edwards is going to run some with that, $500 and $500 for a bike tour event. We're also planning, and I don't have a dollar figure on this yet, so this is a swag rental of recreation equipment from the base, read bouncy houses, dump tanks, which will all be involved with. And they're going to update the handbook. Excuse me, not the handbook, the history book as well. So I went over a little bit of the numbers they gave me by about $1,000, but that's why you see the bump up on the history committee. 1,000 to CERT, which is normal. 2,000 to park, and we normally get a good chunk of that back for event registration, I think fishing tournaments or other things. The dues line, we pay dues to the League of Municipalities for $2,200, to the ECC 473. We're a member of the county chamber, that's $284, and we're a member of NC Byways, that's $1,100. And I'll give everyone this sheet afterwards if you'd like it. NC School Government's at $182. We pay homeowner association dues of $700 to both PKA and Pikes Cove. Yeah, PKA because of the parking lot, Salter Path Road. So we're a member, Robert. And Pikes Cove for they're the large ones there. And again, I have those summaries of those for anyone who's interested. We've not budgeted any planned increase for the sports center benefit. That's open to all volunteers and staff. The telephone line here is a split of the expense at town hall. The travel and training line, I'm anticipating a resumption of mayor and or commissioner attendance at events such as NC Byways, which by the way, the spring dates are out in May. I haven't sent them yet to you.
It's in number a lot.
Maybe we won't need all that, but League Municipalities activity, I mean, they're having a conference in May. I haven't sent it out. I don't plan on attending it this year, but they do have a big annual conference. But often over the course of the year, there's something that myself and an elected might need to go. There are only short sessions this year, so we'll see. And any other meetings or conferences. Supplies is a share of what we use at town hall. The miscellaneous expense here, this is what we provide the state from funds we get from violations. And we don't have any elections scheduled this year. So that's the end of governing body there.
Any questions? Clark? No, I just, how much do we pay PKA for the parking lot?
We have several lots. There are several lots that we pay HOA dues for, and I can't remember them all, but they, whatever.
Well, no, I was just thinking,
But-
well, I thought you said $500 and it should be
No.
$100 for a lot.
Yeah, you don't.
No.
We pay the same as,
It's only $100.
Okay,
But there's-
I just didn't want my.
But that's not for the parking lot. That's because you own a property within PKA. It's not the parking lot. No. I do. Just one question on the professional services. How much do you anticipate Neil's going to get involved in the actual review of the UDO? Does that evolve?
that's a good question. When I got here in '07, he was at the end of I don't know who was here. He was at the end of, I remember Joan and Rhonda telling me about a 2-year review of that. The short answer is I don't know, but we probably do need to put parameters on that and say, review it at a level not to exceed X, because that could get pretty pricey.
Yeah. Okay.
You may be short-sighted though. I mean, when I saw the figures here, I was surprised it wasn't higher. over the years, what you're paying.
North Carolina fees, though.
Well, I know. That's why I thought what should be was probably higher.
I think it'll be in Pennsylvania.
But,
Well, they all
review needs to be done. He needs to, we should do it.
They sometimes are. But that's a great point, and I'll be frank with you, I had not thought of budgeting that. So I'll have to talk to Neil about that.
I just have one other question. It's just a little infinitesimal one, but the library, that's this library in this location, correct?
Yes.
Well, I mean, because that is a question back.
Right.
You're right, so, okay.
Mhm.
I remember these were both.
Yeah.
Okay, we're now on page 6. We're not,
Okay,
finance and administration.
okay, on the salary line here, I'm recommending a 10% cost of living increase. I'm going to circle back on that later tonight. As of February 22, there's been an 8.6 increase in the CPI that we use for salary adjustments, the index we use for salary adjustments. My concern, if we don't reinforce this change, we'll be faced with another adjustment mid-year. So right now in the draft budget, I have 10%.
But if I understand that correctly, I think it's based on the actual CPI from December to December. So we wouldn't really apply it to salaries until July 1. So there's really a 6-month lag in there between the inflation that is realized and when we adjust the salaries. Is that correct, Julie?
Right. I mean, normally, when we adjust our pay scales using that CPI, it's the
It's December to
number
December,
that adjusts pay
the
scales.
previous year.
And then if that's the same number or some variation thereof, it doesn't hit people's existing employee salaries till July 1.
So July 1. So we're adjusting for inflation with a 6-month lag. Yes.
And that's 10% on top of what we passed last week. Or
That's what I programmed.
We'll come back to that, I believe.
I've not programmed any merit increases across the board in all departments in light of the recent wage increase. Additionally, on this salary line, I programmed 49,000 for one additional FTE. And we've split the expense between administration, planning, and inspections. We'll see why later tonight. And the water system. This individual would handle permit tech responsibilities and other areas that'll come up during our transition discussion, removing it from the tax collector, who's really double hatting as a permit tech right now. I'm programming a 12% increase in Blue Cross Blue Shield for the staff and a 5% increase in dental and vision. And a reminder here that we find out, this is not ideal, but we find out in December what our Blue Cross Blue Shield premium increase will be. We have 2 employees who participate in our opt-out program. That's the cash in lieu of insurance. And what that means is they use their other medical benefits normally, but not always, TRICARE instead. And this saves the town 50% of the cost that we would pay if we were paying, if this person was on the town's medical plan. I have an increase programmed in the 401k and the retirement lines because of the wage increases. That's part of the 722,000 I mentioned earlier tonight. Unemployment benefits could be impacted if we lose an employee, which we hope doesn't happen. And the reason you see for that amount for the current fiscal year is a employee we lost in Sonny's department 6 or 8 months ago who went on to unemployment. And that was our expense. Our travel and training for finance and admin, reflect tuition assistance for one employee and seminars and continuing education for Julie's department, which includes finance and tax collection conferences. We don't have anything programmed for workers' comp insurance, fingers crossed.
We don't have anything programmed for workers' compensation.
We don't have an increase.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I missed the word. No change to workers' comp insurance, what I meant. Our insurance deductible line is paid to the league in the event of a claim. We programmed an increase in property and liability insurance from the league. And a reminder here that we have 40 million in property insurance and 5 million in liability. Also of note, this line will likely be impacted when we add items from the FEMA excess list to our list of insured items this year. Maintenance IT, you see a significant jump up. We use Stephen Hellisberg. Some of you all know him from ACS. Just a reminder before I brief you on what he told me, that we had a security analysis last year by VC3. We said Stephen has a fairly robust, our data's backed up. That's the most important thing we have. And but they were impressed by Stephen's security platform. Nonetheless, he came to see Julie and I 2 months ago and recommended a pretty significant upgrade. He's moving away from only data backup and passive measures like firewalls and scanning and such. It's more technical than this, but there's two major upgrades. One is a security software upgrade that is protection specifically against ransomware. And if a computer was accessed at 2 in the morning and this software picked it up, it would take that computer offline from our system immediately. It's active, in other words. And there's also a new monitoring system that monitors computers and servers and automatically applies Windows and Microsoft updates. We have Microsoft platforms here. Rather than prompting, do you want to upgrade now? Or do you want to log out and upgrade, which a lot of folks ignore. So, we were concerned this time last year with ransomware attacks, and that's why I'm recommending this. Our webpage is our webpage. That's our cost. Telephone and postage is a split cost at town hall. Our advertisement line covers notices by Charlie, legal requirements. The supplies line here is the main supply line for town hall, meaning copier paper and pens and pencils, everything else. The tax collection fee reflects what we pay the state for motor vehicle tax collection. Dues and subscriptions in this department reflect both town clerk, finance, and tax collector associations, as well as Julie and I being members of the North Carolina City Manager Association. I need to check, quite frankly, and make sure I'm still a member, because I can't remember over COVID whether or not I sent that in. But recruitment addresses any job advertisements we need to post. We have $6,000 programmed as a contingency in this department, which is really a contingency for the entire budget, which isn't a lot, but we wanted to program something there. And our assets under threshold, meaning they're not costly enough to put on the capital plan, and our threshold is 500, which is probably raised, but it is for 2 town hall PC rotations to keep us up to date.
Okay,
John, that's all I have there.
Questions on page 6?
Just a clarifying question. So you said the 49 for the FTE, is that, in this line, is that the whole salary for that proposed individual, or it's half of that salary? Because you said it was going to be between planning and inspections and.
Water. Yeah, that split.
Right, it is. There's 25% to water, and there is, I don't remember that, I think it's 35% in here, 35% in here, 40 in planning and inspections.
So the salary would be 95,000 for that individual?
No. Sorry, 49 is the whole.
Okay,
49 is
okay,
the whole.
gotcha. That's what I was clarifying.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
the only, okay, gotcha. Thank you. So,
Only a
That makes
portion of
more
that's
sense.
reflected.
right, only,
Right.
she said
35%.
35 and then the rest is in.
Yes.
Bill?
No, nothing further.
I do have one question on the IT upgrade. Who is it that we're protecting? In other words, we have personal data for taxpayers within our system. So this, I'm in agreement with what you're doing. I'm just making sure that we're also, by doing this, protecting individual citizens' information that you have in our computer system. So it's not just a function of protecting online records or records that run our town. You are also protecting whatever personal information you may have about either property, location, social security numbers, all that kind of stuff is incorporated into this. Is that right? Okay.
Employees. One of the things I wanted to mention when Brian was talking, that I remembered from this conversation with Stefan too, is one of the, so the next level, these thieves, terrorists, whatever, are doing is so what they've then gone to is, so not only am I accessing your stuff, I now have a copy of it. And one of the things this does is it prevents the ability for them to then get that information. So it's fine when you're able to get back up online after they've taken your, hostage. But when they then have all of your data, you're still held.
That's how you get all those Medicaid insurance calls, right? Put plenty of laughs in.
Okay, nothing else? Let's go on to page 7.
Okay, planning and inspections. So again, I programmed a 10% COLA for the 2 employees in this department. The training line is fairly significant for 2 people, but Jimmy in particular has probably more continuing education than the rest of the staff combined. Maybe Jason gives him a close second, but between electrical, floodplain, plumbing, and building inspections, he attends several CE to keep licensed as level 3.
Those are exciting topics.
6 hours for each.
And Kevin has has continuing education both for his certified zoning officer, floodplain management, and his American Institute certified planner. So not as much travel as Jim, but that's going to resume this year as well. So I program training as such for them. The vehicle maintenance and gasoline here covers Jim's small pickup truck. Telephone here is a split cost to town hall. Also, the building inspector is one of 3 that has the town phone. Sonny and I being the other 2. The advertisement line addresses any required advertising for public hearings and such. The supply line here is a split of expenses at town hall. I've already mentioned dues. Strike that. I haven't mentioned dues for this department. Kevin has a number of associations, North Carolina Planning, American Institute of Certified Planners, the Certified Floodplain Manager that has a dues requirement, as does the NC Association of Zoning Officers. And Jimmy has dues for buildings inspector, electrical inspector, floodplain management, mechanical, and plumbing inspector. So those self-licking ice cream cone organization do well with dues.
Noisy comment.
But it's required to have more staff. The software line here, strike that.
Planning.
Yes, it's in there. The software here is mainly iWorks, and that's that upgraded permit tech software that we started with 3 years ago. And it also addresses software for GIS that Kevin uses as well. And the referring to the CIP page, which I mentioned, there's a $17,000 expense for the UDO that I'm going to bring up when we talk about reducing the deficit, if you will, because that's a one-time expense. That's not an annual operational expense, but I budgeted for visibility purposes so you can see what we have programmed here for next year. That's all I have here, John.
Okay.
Could you just reiterate, you mentioned how things being split, because part of this is the salaries are split between the water department and other.
Yeah, I normally mention that.
Comes into our discussion, Bill, at some point.
I normally mention that.
Salaries are all split for the new pay, you know.
Yeah, I normally mention that under general government, and I didn't. So 25, the board, go ahead.
So the Board of Commissioners are 75-25, 75% general fund, 25% water enterprise fund. Town manager, myself, town clerk, tax collector are all a 75-25 split, and town planner, sorry, are 75-25 split. I mentioned that the new FTE was 25% would be in water as well. And then Sunny is a 40-60 split with the general fund and water. And Travis, because of now all of his work in doing most, he's a 50-50 with the amount of work that he does under Sunny and water. And that is everybody.
The reason I wanted that is because when we applied to water department, the general fund got a boost out of that from that administration. All reasonable, all justified, I'm not saying.
Alicia?
Good.
Nothing.
No? Okay, moving on. AJ.
Okay, page 8, public safety roll up. So now we'll get to the really cheap department.
Page 9 then?
Page 9, excuse me. That's there, please. Yeah. So again, the salary line reflects the wage increases and the 10% COLA. I'm recommending a slight decrease in part-time expense and a small increase in overtime expense. This is based on our belief that if we go into the summer with 9 officers, hopefully we will, we'll be less reliant on help from the outside, which is hard to come by. And you know, the overtime obviously impacted by would be our people who are impacted by the wage increase. We have 1 officer here who participates in our opt-out program for medical benefits. This year, I'm going to ask, actually, Jason and Ryan to comment on this if anyone has any questions, but recommending an increase in medical physicals line for police. And the intent is to use the same outfit that fire has used for years for the detailed physicals for our paid and volunteer firemen, to use them also with police. Heretofore, prior to this budget recommendation, our medical physical line for police was mainly for new joins, getting physicals done, and any investigations we did after a fender bender with a car when we had to kind of do a fitness and duty test on an officer, which is routine. Now, we'd like to do the same physical that fire does. Complete blood work, pulmonary function analysis, heart monitoring, on, treadmill type things, PSA, and really it's your full range physical. And I think it's money well spent, because if something happened to one of those guys, it's preventable, which is what physicals are for. It would work. So I've got that program this year.
We don't have to do that for Ryan, do we now? That's right, Julie.
Yes, it involves mental
I
evaluation.
didn't see that, but yeah, I agree with you, yeah, right.
Does that include like drug testing and stuff too?
Yeah, so that, under that line item, it's our pre-employment psychologicals, our pre-employment drug screens. If an employee is involved in a crash and we have any suspicion of anything, it would be like a post-crash drug screen, things of that nature.
The training line in police addresses, I'm going to read off some here in a minute, addresses a laundry list of training that Ryan has his folks conduct. It includes travel for some local training and some training outside the county. Slight decrease from last year. We're not decreasing the training, but slight decrease in last year because we're sending less people to the Salem Academy. Everyone's heard that before. That's DOJ Academy. Ryan says they're not doing what they used to do, but just a few things off Ryan's list: radar training, intox training, property and evidence training, crime scene investigation, suicide investigation, and taser recertification, and many other things. But there are things, again, you want your folks qualified on for this for reasons that are obvious. Vehicle maintenance includes both, includes annual tire, oil, mechanical work is required for 9 police vehicles. And generally that number's been stable of late, because we've now got a very solid rotation schedule up for that. That's paying off. The equipment maintenance line, which is substantial, strike that. The equipment maintenance line here is to address maintenance on vehicle radios, personal radios, vehicle light systems, and weapons. Uniform maintenance line reflect cleaning, alterations, and embroidery on officers' uniforms. The telephone line under police addresses police cell phones, all of the MDTs in their vehicles. Gasoline, you see a 25% jump. And obviously the police, with the number of vehicles and our take-home policy, have a substantial gasoline expense. So we were pretty conservative there, hopefully. The uniform expense for police addresses polos for our officers, duty pants, shorts, boots, court uniforms, and cold weather jackets. Dues for police addresses membership in the Chiefs Association and the Police Executive Association, as well as the Property and Evidence Association. The operational supplies line for police are for the following expenses: Southern Software, which is our standard police reporting management program; Lexapro, which is important. We picked that up several years ago when Ryan came aboard as chief. It updates all of our police policies to ensure they're consistent with state and federal regulations and laws. Leads Online, which is kind of cool. Is that new?
No, this is our second or third year.
Okay.
It's the pawn shop
Yeah.
software.
Yeah, it gives us access to registries there.
Yeah.
And quick law, which Ryan refers to as legal Google.
Yes.
Which I think actually accurately describes what we do. Additionally, under supplies operational is our community outreach expenses, which includes cookouts, Halloween candy, stickers, and badges, cartridges for our tasers and bolo wrap systems, portable breath testing, as well as a PD Christmas party that Brian has for his crew each year. The assets under threshold line for police addresses PD gear replacement for our officers, which include flashlights, magazine pouches, and belts. Our annual body camera expense, 2 new vests, as we mentioned earlier, Kevlars, a mobile camera that's going to allow us to place it where we need to place it, where we suspect bad things are happening, like bridges are being graffitied. Right now, Ryan's using Jason's hunting trail cameras. One of Jason's guys.
That doesn't
It's a good use, yeah.
And additionally, 2 new NDTs, which is part of Ryan's normal rotation in our vehicles. And 1 additional patrol rifle, which will bring us to a quantity of 6. And finally, lastly, under this line, replacement vehicle equipment to include sirens, mobile radios, and a computer stand.
No, that's just almost like a contingency because that stuff, the salt, especially lights and sirens and all that, the salt just eats it up. So if I budget it, we don't use it. If I don't budget it.
The capital, if you refer to your capital plan for police, the capital plan for police involves 1 new vehicle in accordance with our normal rotation. Our contribution to Law 6 and a new radar trailer for use within the town to address speeding. And some of these will come up when I want to address the shortfall here shortly, but they've come up in discussion a bit late, so it's on the capital plan right now.
What's the traffic sign you've got out there now? I don't think.
So that is on loan to us from the Governor Highway Safety Program. There's a police captain in Atlantic Beach who's our area coordinator for that program. The radar sign that we have now is, it's a coin toss on whether it works, and then it'll work, and then we go to download data a month later, and it's collected no data. And so they called and asked if we wanted to use it for 3 weeks. And so it was on Oakley for a week, in between the golf course and Highway 58.
Right.
Self-explanatory. It's on Mimosa now. And then we're also going to have it for a week on Highway 58, just because we haven't collected any actual speed data other than our officers' enforcement on compliance on Highway 58.
Is that one easy to move around?
That one is a lot easier to move around.
You just put it in up on any.
Yeah, we can put that up on any pole.
So the Law 6 antenna, you said you were going to use the grant for that, you think?
Ryan, I saw that. But I didn't think it was anywhere near as effective as the ones that I referred. I referred some information to Ryan 4 months ago, so one I had seen in another region of the country, and it has another element to it. So if you're speeding, it says caution, flashes red like that. And very honestly, psychologically, I better do something about it. And then if you're going the right speed, it says thank you. And I know that sounds, but everybody I talked to around where these were said that really helped. So that's why it's
If you're going too slow, it says move it.
No, but having it be related, it really changes people's thinking patterns. This, you get used to it.
So I reached out to that company and they don't have good support.
Down here at all.
Yeah. No,
So it hasn't made it across the Mason-Dixon line.
right.
Across.
They said our southern hospitality was nice enough.
It would be really exciting when that happens, because it's really different.
Just a question, maybe this is for you, Julie. I didn't see any line item for insurance, property and liability insurance for the police department. Is that all charged just to the general fund? and
It's
not
all in my department.
all in your
That covers-
department, so it's not
It's not,
separated?
no. So it's all in it. That is split between general fund and water, but the water portion is for water stuff and, a portion of the liability, but all of the general fund share of property and liability and workers' comp is all in my department.
Okay.
Just an educational question for me. When we send people to training, these are often things that you want on the police force. You want people to be trained in a certain way or for a certain ability. Can we or do we ever assign an obligation with that training to that officer? Because we're sending them to training, even though you want that officer now becomes more marketable because they now have a certain training level. Is that even legal for us to do that? Or have we considered doing that?
I don't know about the legal portion of it.
We talked about it when we did the tuition reimbursement part of the personnel policy and adding a payback type thing to that. And we did not come to like if you sent to training or this is that you would then do a payback if you left within a certain period of time. I'd have to look at what the current language is, but I don't think it went down to that type of level of training.
Well, I think it's something worth looking at because it gets to the whole retention issue. If we're spending money on you, then we would like to make sure you're going to, give us that return. And I don't know how to define that return. It's just something I think we ought to try to consider, not only for the police department, but also for the fire and EMS as well.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, so Brian, I can't remember all the things that you read off about training, but like, for instance, and the only reason I know this is from talking to Dakota recently on this little radar stuff. But so some of the training that they go to, it's not necessarily, it's benefiting the officer because they have that training, but it's for a purpose that then that benefits the town almost better, because like you would not be able to, we would not be able to, I'm going to say prosecute somebody for speeding, let's say, without having a radar certified person who operated the radar. It just wouldn't be able to do that. Right?
And I would think you would get in the territory of almost making the training optional. Because if you force somebody to go to training and then have that trailing obligation of if you leave within 2 years, you have to pay it back. Well, I want all of our patrol officers to be radar certified, so I don't really give them the option. I say, hey, this is when you're going. And so I don't know the answer to that question.
I think it's a good idea, but I think you got to separate education from certifications. There are certifications to do your job are one thing. Like how do you do an alcohol test or radar and any of those things. You just need to be certified. But if you're going to school to get an advanced degree in police science or something, then I think maybe this.
So our tuition remission doesn't do that now, because I think my company, great.
Our tuition assistance doesn't have a time payback. It has a financial penalty if they leave within X amount of time, which we implemented once, as I recall. It was Natalie, actually. But there's not, that's an interesting question. I'm going to ask Neil, I don't know if you can have time up.
Okay.
But most of this stuff, we send them for our specific requirements for their job, like radar, alcohol, and the rest of it. None of that stuff is real optional, is it?
Well, I don't make it optional.
Yeah.
So,
It's specific to the performance of their duties.
correct.
But it speaks,
Yeah,
it speaks
it's interesting.
to,
It's an interesting
speaks to the
question.
quality of our force. To get to your point, I think a lot of these aren't absolutely necessary.
Right.
A lot of these things, we could have a BLET graduate who has a very basic, how to operate a radar gun, how to operate anything hanging on them, Glock, or taser,
Hopefully.
but not send them to anything else. But Ryan's got to, speaks to the quality of the force, I'm saying, is to the degree, the span of training you have. It's so funny.
Took his good one.
You said hanging, training on anything hanging on them, and I said, we were, hopefully,
I know.
training on hanging on
I
them.
just think of Andy Griffith and the
That's
deputy,
true.
what was
They keep their bullets, they keep their bullets in their pockets.
There was the one police officer recently that went to tase somebody and shot him.
Yeah, that's right, that girl, that went down.
She was in jail.
One of the
It's
things,
hard because it's different side and everything.
it's a bit different by region too, which I've learned in the first 3 years being involved. Things that were common in other regions are less common here, and they become, it's not put down to anybody, it's just recognizing the differences. That here it becomes more easy, as Mayor's pointed out, to become
Like mustard in our
an
cars.
advantage to give them to work here, but every place, most places are doing it now. And I don't want to open up any other source, but it is different in different places, and we can talk about that.
Yes, it seems to me that it's not elective, what we heard Brian or Jason say. I mean, they're requiring. So if it's required, we shouldn't be, requiring any payback of any sort. If it's something elected they want to do off on their own, that might be something different, but that hasn't been the case, has it?
No, I mean, somebody came to me and said they wanted to go to underwater basket weaving. I would ask them when they wanted
Oh,
to take vacation days to go
yeah,
right.
to do that. So, yeah, it's all pretty job and function specific.
Well, I would ask that we not just reject it out of hand. I think
No, I agree.
the issue is, yes, we can separate, and that's why I led with whatever Ryan needs, because he wants his police force, our police force, to be at a certain certification. That's one thing. But if I would offer that if you have an officer that doesn't want to get trained, then maybe that's an officer we don't want here.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have someone who wants to improve themselves. And if that comes with some obligation, I don't see that as a negative. But to Clark's point, maybe regionally, there's a little bit of difference, but let's just take a look at it and see if there's some way to fit that in there. Okay.
Good idea. Okay, moving on, page 10. Okay, this is kind of Jason's second department, if you will. Emergency management. The salary line in this department reflects the wage and COLA increases for one employee. That's the admin assistant down there, by the way. The training line here reflects monthly meetings for our participation in the Carolina Star OSHA program, as well as two people. We've increased it a little bit, 2 people to go to OSHA's annual conference, which we anticipate will resume this year. The OSHA Star program line itself reflects the purchase of safety equipment, which includes signs, vests, fire extinguishers and such. The telephone line is a share of the building. This also addresses our mobile hotspots on both engines, the ambulance and Chief Baker's vehicle. The alarm monitoring here addresses the alarm just in the public safety building. The electric bill, the PSB LP addresses heat, and looking at this, I'm a little concerned with that line because I paid for my propane at my house 2 weeks ago. But seriously, we might need to look at that. So, we'll take a look at that. The satellite phones, we started this early on when Jason became chief. We leased airtime for 2 satellite phones
with the chief and myself to have essentially during storm season. And that was a lesson learned from Irene in 11 when we essentially lost all communications from the town. All the cellulars went out as well as CenturyLink and such. We upcheck that every year as well. And the supplies line here addresses essentially all administration supplies within the building. Staples, office ordering, office supplies, truck wash and bleach, which particular guys like cleaning trucks, someone said, and all building cleaning supplies. And this addresses both police and fire.
Re-entry passes, stickers you put on your golf cart, say register.
Yeah. Re-entry passes for sure. I'll check on golf carts to see.
That's in the golf carts in my supplies.
Okay, there any questions? Card, Mr. Bill? No. Okay, moving on.
Okay, page 11 is the roll-up page for STEM.
Fire EMS.
Like that. Page 11 is the expenses page, fire and EMS. The salary line for fire, again, programmed a recent wage increase and the 10% COLA. The part-time EMTs are essential for Jason covering vacancies, and I've programmed a slight increase there because of just due to inflation. There is a significant increase to the overtime line, as you probably saw. And a reminder here that we have programmed overtime for our fire and EMS folks. That's actually it's programmed into their shift schedule. We have 2 firefighters who participate in our medical opt-out program. The other North Carolina pension that's a small expenditure, but just to remind everyone what that is. That's a benefit program Jason started a few years ago. We pay $10 per month per employee. 11 of the 13 firemen participate. You have to have some degree of longevity before you join it. And they receive a small pension upon retirement for this. The volunteer stipends refers to the funding we provide to our volunteers based on their participation in calls. And a reminder, they get $5 per call if they come to the PSV and $10 per call if they respond to a structure fire. Those are the checks that Jason and Bruce give out for the Christmas. So the medical and physical lines relate to the physicals we discussed earlier. That's both for paid and volunteer staff. And I say this every year, but it's funny, if you want to rise, go see Jack Doyle on a treadmill machine with heart monitors all over. All of our volunteers go through that. And he shows up for fire, so it's necessary. The training and travel line includes tuition assistance for 1 employee, as well as attendance at various classes by the chief and his folks. It includes 2 individuals attending an arson conference and 2 individuals attending a fire life safety education course. The maintenance line is significant, and it addresses all fire apparatus and vehicles. And just a couple examples of the expenses here. Pump testing just on 1 vehicle alone is $500. We have 2 vehicles to do that on. Annual oil and filter changes on the 2 large vehicles, 2 engines are $1,500 each. Annuals on our ambulance is $800. Also covers annual inspections and replacement of fire extinguishers, the calibrations of our ladders, and the maintenance of our self-contained breathing apparatus, oxygen fuel machine. It also covers periodic maintenance expenditures and you've seen one, two, in the past year on the ladder truck, when we have a major malfunction, we've had those two issues with the pumper. And that's what we pay this out of here, and get insurance to cover. The gasoline line is increased to address the inflation I mentioned earlier, and we've doubled the diesel line because of the price increases we've seen, as you can see. VFIS, that's our premium. VFIS is that additional insurance we have that specifically for our mobile firefighting equipment and any damage our equipment might see on a call. And this is great insurance. We've used it in the past as it covers full replacement. So we need to keep this. We've programmed a slight increase here as well. The uniform line to the fire department includes workday uniforms, t-shirts, trousers, 3 more sets of Class A uniforms and polos for all of our paid and volunteers. The dues and subscription line here is significant. These figures include the personnel roster certification by the state fire marshal. That impacts our score. Membership in the North Carolina Rescue Association, which, by the way, provides some insurance for any injuries to our staff. Our emergency reporting software, our active 911 phone pager system, which sends text to all of our paid volunteers during calls. This one's key, software for hospital data transfer, and our striker contract. You recall the striker Gurney that we got voting system that we got with the new ambulance. And our striker contract covers the powered stretcher, the life pack, the power stretcher loader, and a stair chair, which Jason said is pretty important when you're going up 4 floors. Going down 4 floors. That's why that line is so significant. Ambulance collection fees is our expense to Ambulance Pro. That's the organization collecting ambulance fees. The supplies operational line is significant. This is what I mentioned earlier this month. This line addresses medical supplies. It includes things such as equipment meds required on the ambulance, narcotics, inhalers, EpiPens, and Narcan, and a long list of other required medications. Also, this line addresses equipment that Jason uses, such as batteries, beach flags, advertisements for new positions, and parts for equipment such as his chainsaw, essentially anything else on his vehicle. The assets under threshold line here includes the 3 new sets of turnout gear Joel you mentioned earlier, as well as replacement laptops for both the chief's office and the records room. And we have no capital expenditures planned in the fire department.
Okay, let's go around. Any questions?
Just an educational question on the maintenance side. How much of that is off-site and how much of it has to be done by a certified tech? Can you guys do any of that, or do you have to have somebody come in?
No, nobody touch fire truck unless they're certified, but